Welcome to this Sunday edition of Two Men in the Middle, where two men in the middle of the Midwest pontificate about news, politics, and current events. I'm Brandon Koenig.
I'm Craig Huey.
Craig, we have 2 weeks to cover. A lot has happened in 2 weeks. We've seen Kamala Harris's surge in the polls. Her rise. Battleground states back on the map, high favorability ratings, enthusiasm, the naming of her VP pick. And we've seen the Trump campaign unable to find a coherent message, a response that works, and floundering, really.
Yeah. So I think that one of the questions I've been pondering about Kamala Harris's rise is it feels like this is starting to turn into a movement, starting to feel a little 2008 with a Barack Obama, starting to feel like a little bit of, hey, fate is starting to swing over on our side.
It's definitely the vibes
at this
that
point.
I'm getting, yeah.
I think that Kamala Harris didn't start a movement. Kamala Harris has been placed at the front of a movement. With Biden out of the way, that gave permission for everybody to come back home to the Democratic Party. It also, and this wasn't only hardcore Democrat people like me who are part of the base, who are always part of the base, who are always going to come home if you gave them any inclination that Biden wasn't going to be on the ticket and that you were actually putting a plan together that could win the election. We were always going to come back. I think what we've seen is anybody who is Democrat Party leaning at all, anybody that in the past would have been a casual or a low information or a low turnout voter to the Democratic Party, they have also kind of immediately snapped back in place.
Yes.
And I think also we're seeing now Kamala Harris's rally in Arizona. I thought the best part about it was the introduction by the Republican mayor of Mesa, the city it was in, where he basically stood up and told the Republicans, don't feel any loyalty to this party, to these people. You didn't leave them. They left you. These people are crazy. They're nuts. And you don't have to put up with this. We can end this right now. And I think that's the overall wave momentum that is happening, that the potential for that was always there. Once Biden stepped out of the way, that was going to come together anyway. Harris just now is at the front of this wave getting pushed forward. And I think that's where a lot of people on Trump's team, a lot of folks in the conservative media, they're struggling with, in some ways, this isn't Harris putting this together. This is Harris riding a wave of Democrat relief of thank God we're not going to get slaughtered because we put Biden up there. And also kind of a snap back to Trump hatred. So many people want to see Trump gone. As soon as you gave them any viable path to get him out of the way, I think you're seeing them all jump on that bandwagon.
Right. Biden really underscored the underlying anti-Trump sentiment that was out there. Like it was it never went away. It was obscured by the fact that Biden performed so awfully during the debate, but Trump did not perform well. If you had someone who was normal and could hold his or her own, Trump would have lost that debate handily. And so the entire last year, though, the Democrats have been hindered by the fact that above all, Democrat voters, American voters at large said Biden was too old to run. He's too senile. So there was that understanding there that if you replaced him with just a competent candidate and took age off the table, that you could rally the base again. And that's what we're seeing happening. And we've seen the mood shift from anxiety to optimism, which is most stunning. And I agree that movement was already there, but there's also some interesting changes we've seen. Harris is much more comfortable in her skin now than we've ever seen her before.
She's totally different.
She's totally different. Comes across as casual, authentic. Even at the rally, I forget which rally this was. It may have been Michigan, where she was heckled by pro-Palestinian.
Yeah,
she handled that very well and kind of just brushed it off and said, you want to vote for Trump?
It wasn't misogynistic.
No.
To say Harris was not a bad candidate due to her personal presentation, her cackling, her massive use of her hands that she flips around. All of that was legitimate. It's obvious somebody has gotten in her ear and has coached her up against those things because she just doesn't present, or she hasn't presented them since she stepped into this role.
Well, and and some people, and I've seen this discussed on other podcasts, some people rise to the moment under pressure. Others, basically fall apart. She has risen to the moment. And I think we saw that from Biden's immediate withdrawal, she started hammering the phones. She locked up the nomination.
Very
she
quickly.
Closed ranks. But also, I don't know, she has a lot of the Biden people around her, so I'm trying to figure out who to attribute this to. But one of the issues with Biden, in addition to his age, is that his campaign didn't really have a message. Like, I didn't understand, what are they running on? Yeah. With Harris, there's been a shift, because I've said all along, like, I'm here for the pro-democracy message, but that doesn't resonate with, like, a low-information voter, blue-collar who is concerned about the economy. You have to have a greater message than that. And so she has a message. She has a freedom message, which I think is really smart. She's taking the freedom mantra from the Republicans and really saying, hey, we're the party of freedom, and this is why. It's a hopeful message. It's joyous. It's optimistic. And so I think that's also the difference with Biden, because I think the doom and gloom and the fear only takes you so far. You have to be able to rally people with hope. And so that's where she's really channeling that Obama message that we saw that was so effective in 2008 and again in 2012.
Every presidential candidate is better with a tiny amount of Ronald Reagan poured into them, with a tiny amount of optimism in the message.
And that's why I think she'll be successful and Trump won't, because Trump has none of that. Like, his is all doom and gloom. There's no...
The secret ingredient to 2016 was joy. Trump was having a ball. The people with him were having fun. When in the last, they talk about how strongly Trump closed in 2016, and that's something to watch now in 2024. Trump is a different person. He doesn't have that in him. He doesn't have it in him physically. He doesn't have it in him mentally. And everything that Trump enjoyed about campaigning against Hillary in 2016 is absent for him in 2024.
No.
And he just looks old and mean and wore out.
And you get the feeling like he doesn't really want to do this. And this all goes back to really the only reason he's doing this is to keep himself out of legal jeopardy.
Seems like it.
I mean,
he has nothing on the calendar for the rest of the month.
He went a whole week without campaigning. Like, what?
Monday he does he's going to do a Spaces with Elon Musk on X. But after that, he has nothing planned. He has no rallies planned. There's nothing on his schedule.
And that's crazy to me, because if you remember, I mean, even earlier this year, I mean, the 2020 cycle, I mean, he was known for holding rally after rally, several in a given week. So I don't understand that. And then this past week, and I get that there's a big Senate race in Montana, but of all the states you're going to go to, it's Montana.
And that's what you deliver? I think what's happening to the Trump campaign, because the Trump campaign is run by two people who have won before.
Yeah.
The consensus is it's Chris LaCivita
and Susie Wiles.
These people know what they're doing.
These are top-tier campaign strategists.
I think what this comes down to is there's what you want to do and there's what you can do. And LaCivita and the other gal have probably put together a very nice plan of what they'd like Trump to do. This is what we want you to do. This is the message we want you to deliver. This is how we want you to deliver it. This is how we want you to present yourself. What they're bumping up against is what Trump can do. And I think what we're learning is Trump can do less and less and less. And that's now affecting his campaign.
Well, what Trump can do and what he's willing to do. I mean, your campaign plan, if you're LaCivita and Susie Wiles, will only be so effective and go so far if you have a willing candidate. Trump is stubborn as well and has a tendency to get in his own way. We saw that, which I don't know if we were talked about when the black journalist, like when he's going after, she turned black all of a sudden. Like, I mean.
Brandon, she's whatever race she wants to be. She just pops into a room and says, I'm black, I'm white, I'm Indian.
Dude, that was one of the most disastrous performances, I mean, exchanges that I've ever seen. I mean, that ranks right up there.
This is a continuous theme I'm going to ask you through the pod. But would that one interaction with the National Association of Black Journalists in a normal campaign, would that have ended Trump's campaign?
Completely.
100%. For every decade we've had elections up to now, that would have thrown him out of the race. Just that alone, his performance was so freaking poor in that, just brutal. So I think I've got to start with some apologies, or at least with some recognition of where I've been 1,000% wrong. Because in the last couple months, I've said a lot of shit on this podcast about what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it seems like absolutely none of it has come to pass.
You were really down at one point on.
I have been
you had basically thrown in the towel.
Negative with the Democrats, and I think that represents how far the Democratic vote had gotten suppressed.
Oh yeah,
that even a lifelong Dem who's never voted for Republicans is willing to say, "There's under no condition that I'll vote for Biden." That gives you an idea of how much ground was able to be made up so fast once Biden got off the ticket. But I think the first thing that I've got 100% cop to is on an email strain with us talking politics, I basically said that Trump's assassination was the most politically significant event of my lifetime and would be the signature event of the campaign moving forward. And it would completely swing the election in Trump's favor from a messaging perspective.
And I did push back against you on that.
You did.
Yeah.
You said in today's day and age, you just have no evidence to say that that's true. You were 1,000% right.
20 years ago, 30 years ago, absolutely, but
we
not
have
today.
Completely forgotten about Trump's assassination.
That feels like so long ago now. I mean, it really does.
And I think it's interesting to ponder on this a little bit because I think Trump's inability to turn that into a marketing presentation in his campaign underlines the theory that he's just not capable of delivering much as a candidate anymore. And this gets back to that horrible speech that he gave at the RNC.
Yeah, that was his opportunity to really frame that assassination attempt into a message going forward around unity, around bringing the country together. And then he had completely obliterated that, went back to, his standard stump speech, tear it down, tear everybody down.
I mean, I wasn't expecting
politics.
Any type of real change in Trump, but at least I thought he recognized the power of the story politically. And in the moment, could make some small changes to what he was doing to focus on the assassination attempt and his handling and his courage after the attempt. And my reason for thinking this was he did have the presence of mind to jump up and pump his fist and shout, "Fight, fight, fight," in the moment. I thought he could at least recognize, hey, there's some hay to be made here. I can personalize myself. I can take the image that I've been projecting. I can change it slightly. This would resonate with suburban women, perhaps. And I still get to talk to my core base, which is young men, about what a stud I am and how masculine, how I took the bullet and all of that. And his inability to take that event and turn it into a politically dynamic, interesting, captivating political message, I just completely overestimated his abilities at this point.
I mean, he had the nation's attention. I mean, could have easily done it, and he squandered it.
Just did nothing with it. Is there any way he can tap back into that? Or do you feel, it feels like that time's gone?
I feel like the moment is gone. I feel like there was a period in time, a window there where he could have done that. I think it's very difficult to come back now after he has, where the dynamic of the race is currently. I mean, his messaging track doesn't align there, so he would have to do a sharp pivot. It would come across as kind of weird, disorienting, inauthentic. So I think if he tried to pivot to some type of renewed tone, it would just be weird. It would be out of place because he already squandered that.
So that's an area that I thought his campaign, he would make that the center of his stump speech. I thought there would be enough recognition that, hey, the stump speech is getting a little old. This is a way we can shorten it. We can make it more personal. You can expand who the stump speech is for by using the story of the assassination. And he's just not capable of doing any of that.
No.
Brandon, this is a clear sign. If a presidential candidate cannot take an incident like that, personalize it, and turn it into positive political messaging, it's a real indication that person's limitations of what they can do.
Completely. And I think we're finally at a stage now with Biden out of the picture that we can focus on Trump's limitations, his cognitive issues, the fact that he is not completely there, that he continues to confuse events and people and places very routinely in his speeches and public appearances. And I think you've alluded to this when we were off mic. The fact that he has such a light schedule, I think, is indicative of his team being very fearful of putting him in front of an audience where he could make a mistake and screw things up.
I mean, what would you feel safe putting Trump in front of now? That press conference on Thursday was a total disaster. And once again, I'll ask you the question. if a presidential candidate gave that address that press conference in 1955, 65, 75, 85, 95, 2005, he's done, right?
Oh, completely. There's no way that person could survive, politically.
I listened to that. I didn't see it visually. I just listened to it. It sounds even worse when you can't see Trump and you're just listening to him.
Yeah, I mean, the optics were bad as well, so I can only imagine just the audio.
The second big thing I've got to cop to is I'm on record multiple times as saying Harris is one of the least talented politicians I've ever seen. I stand completely by that right up to 27 days ago. Her run in the 2019 primary was just awful. It was one of the worst campaigns. And I think the theory that I've heard about it that makes the most sense, she got knocked back by the other people on stage about her record as a prosecutor. It was a weird time with the George Floyd riots, what we thought of police and all of that. And I think she never got comfortable on stage, and she never got comfortable being attacked from multiple fronts. With those two things kind of out of the way, she doesn't have to focus on this whole stage of people and what they're going to say. The how we view police and crime is different than it was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Her prosecutor and her ability to prosecute Trump is now a positive, not a negative.
And she's leaned into the prosecutorial aspect, which I think is great. And by not having to go through another primary where she feels pulled to the left, it's given her leeway to just be who she is. And a good example of that, her campaign has a new ad on immigration where they're hitting back pretty hard. And they're saying, hey, I supported the strongest immigration bill in decades. Republicans obliterated it. This is what we need. She is not shying away from that. We hadn't seen an ad from the Biden campaign on immigration at all yet, or really discussion on pushing back against the Republican narrative. So all of these things, and I think, again, she has gone back on her position on fracking from 2019. She's made some very astute political decisions that you need to make, I think, if you're trying to appeal to the broad electorate. And, that's what we need to see in a campaign. So whether that's her, whether that's advisors or a combination, there's some good political skill.
We haven't seen her yet personally address changing positions. She's let it leak out through campaign surrogates and stuff like that. But it feels like one of her final hurdles to get past is a simple sit-down interview, which she'll do in a couple weeks. And I'm much more confident in her ability to handle that interview than I was in 2019. Did you think that Kamala Harris, this was her? Do you think she was capable of this before this last month?
I don't know if she was capable. Like I said, I think maybe it was the confluence of events that happened where she was finally comfortable enough to do this. She was in a role where she was stifled to a great degree, or basically put in charge of initiatives that were impossible to fulfill. Yeah. So I think part of it is that she was never comfortable in the VP role, and that was pretty obvious early on. Mm-hmm. And I've taken a different look too. She had so many cringeworthy moments in which she gave word salad interviews when she was representing the Biden administration. And some of that may be, too, where she felt this constant pressure to give the perfect answer that represented them and not what she thought, when she doesn't have to do that anymore. So I think all of that is indicative. And so maybe this is the Kamala Harris that was there all along, but we never got to see because she was constantly felt pulled to play a specific part, specific direction. And now all of that has been wiped away. It's like a clean slate. And so here's the Kamala Harris unburdened by things that have come before.
Did you just use a Kamala Harris line?
I did. I just worked that in.
You just fell on the coconut tree next.
I'm not going to use that one next. But that one I fell right into because that was just too easy.
You're a Democrat now,
that was
Brandon.
Too easy.
You can say it. If you vote for Kamala Harris, you're a Democrat. You can come over.
Well, I am voting for Kamala Harris. Yeah. I think that's pretty obvious. So,
I think we're both voting for Kamala Harris at this point in time. But it is true that Kamala Harris is also being handled very craftily by her handlers.
That's true. Yeah.
They have put together a plan. They recognize what her strengths and weaknesses are, and they're playing to it. I don't see a problem with that.
That's what good campaigns do. That's what we see. And like I said, I think Trump's campaign handlers are trying to do that. They just have a candidate that's incapable.
Yeah,
as you said.
They just won't. Whatever plan they present to Trump, he is not going to execute that plan.
He can't stay on message for a moment.
That press conference of that Montana rally were just disasters. Awful. In the middle, right when Harris is surging, you pull those two things, it's not going to help.
I do. I don't want to spend time sticking my finger in the face of some of the overtly partisan pro-Biden people, but the ones who were
let's do it, because those people were 1,000% wrong.
1,000% wrong, and they kept snapping back at people like myself, especially on Twitter and online. I mean, saying we didn't know what we were talking about, that we were hurting the candidate, the bigger picture.
You're handing this to Trump.
When Biden stepped down, the polls were awful. I mean, not only were they awful, but Biden was starting to fall behind in states like Minnesota and New Hampshire. Colorado was within a couple points. You cannot win a race on that. All of that has been reversed. And I think the biggest telltale indicator of that is that some of these extremely vulnerable Senate incumbents in swing states were not appearing with Biden. They were finding reasons to say, Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, when Biden was there, Tammy's like, oh, I have a conflict. Sorry, I can't be there. That's all changed now. Tammy Baldwin was there in Wisconsin with Kamala when she was there. They're making a point to be there. So you can see that the political reality has shifted. They feel comfortable now being present with the nominee of their own party, where they did not before because of the political liability. And there's this feeling of relief, not only for the top of the ticket, Craig, but also the fact that Democrats want to gain back the House. They face a very uncertain Senate map with incumbents that are very vulnerable but can still win. Mm-hmm. And now they have the wind at their sails. When it was very possible, we were looking at a scenario before Biden dropped out where Biden lost, Democrats would lose the Senate and not gain back the majority in the House, and you could have a trifecta of Republican control across all three branches.
Yeah.
That doesn't look like it's going to happen now, and that's also exciting for the party.
The other thing that Trump is butting up against, the last 8 years did happen.
Yeah.
I mean, the last 8 years of Trump do exist. And because of his actions, behavior, and just general jackassedness over the last 8 years, his coalition moving forward is very, very, very small.
It is, yeah.
At this stage, it's an all boys versus girls race, how Trump sees it. The only cohort that he's playing to is young men across white, black, and all racial lines.
Yeah, and you've commented on this because he is he's going on with these influencers that are very big.
Aiden Ross was a perfect example. I mean, most people would consider that embarrassing, that you went on some 22-year-old kid's stream and he gave you a Rolex and a Cybertruck.
Right.
Oh, that he later had to take back because the Rolex violated campaign finance law. So he gave that to Barron. And it comes out the Cybertruck was just a rented prop that he didn't own. But this is what Trump has reduced himself to. What keeps throwing me over and over again, and I don't know how to translate this into what Trump's doing. Trump is the first time a presidential campaign is running a reductive campaign. Yeah. He just keeps taking people out of the coalition and keeps focusing smaller and smaller and smaller on men.
That's it. Yeah, it's a pretty obvious
and his track record
strategy.
What pivot does he make? There's a rumor that so the Trump campaign allegedly was hacked by Iranian nationals. I don't believe that at all, but allegedly there is some vetting material on J.D. Vance that's going to be leaked to the public due to this Iranian hack. And the rumor is this is the 3-step process they're going to use to try to get Vance off the ticket and replace him. If Trump takes Vance off the ticket, Trump's lost.
Yeah, it's over at that point.
There's no way he takes Vance off the ticket.
What is the latest they can do that as far as ballot deadlines? I mean, there's only...
I don't know. I mean, we're coming right up on it. I heard it was mid-August. By that time, if you didn't have your ticket set or something, there was going to be problems getting it on a ballot.
Okay, because I do know that the first absentee mail ballots go out in North Carolina in less than 30 days now. That's where. So
if it's going to happen, it's going to be something that has to happen quickly. But Trump would lose. The election is lost if he does that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no greater sign of dysfunction, disarray than pulling a move like that, because you reduce your coalition even further. You're not gonna gain votes because anybody you would appoint, it would be seen as just a sheer act of pandering to the.
And what's Doug Bergman gonna do? What's Marco Rubio gonna do? Who are you gonna put on that ticket? I mean, I guess if he did it, would he go with Elise Stefanik, a woman, to try to at least get some traction in that area?
I could see that as kind of a sheer pandering move, doing something like that. And how awful if you're JD Vance? Like, what is your answer? Like, after all of that, like, to being replaced?
He did a round of interviews on the Sunday shows this morning that were just disastrous. Jonathan Karl looking at him saying, "You're crazy," to him when he tried to defend a comment by Trump at that Montana rally that Tim Walz signed a bill that allowed your children to be kidnapped by the state for trans surgery. And J.D. Vance was actually trying to defend that.
I mean, and speak about a nominee. So J.D. Vance, if you look at his favorability ratings, the lowest of any VP nominee in 60 years. Like, nobody more unpopular. And everything he's done has only added to that unfavorability rating that people have of him. The tarmac stunt, like trying to confront Kamala Harris. And then, like, the quip about, oh, it'll be my plane soon because, again, she wasn't even there. I mean, all of this stuff, like, it doesn't add at all. It doesn't help him. It doesn't bring in new voters. Like, I don't understand.
So you've been around politicians. You worked on a senator's staff. You've hung out with people elected at the federal level before.
Right.
Did he not think the cat lady comment was coming back? How do these people see themselves and the words they say? How can you get caught so flat-footed as a professional politician not to know I'm going to get hammered for the cat lady comment?
Yeah.
Do they just etch-a-sketch things out of their mind? Do they not think people... To me, that's malpractice. How do you not know going in, oh, shit, first thing I'm going to have to do is apologize for that cat lady comment because, they're going to get me on that one. Do they not... How does that not happen? How do you not sit down and say, throw out everything stupid you've told Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson over the last year, and let's figure out a way to deal with that?
Again, I don't think there's been a lot of disagreement in the campaign about picking J.D. Vance. I'm sure you followed the theory that Kellyanne Conway has been part of the leaks that have been occurring because she was not a J.D. Vance.
Okay.
So there's this theory out there because she was adamantly opposed to J.D. Vance being on the ticket because of all the liabilities he brought. And so up till like the final decision, she was counseling Trump not to do it. Of course, Don Jr. was all for J.D. Vance. So he's chosen. And so now they think that a lot of the negative stuff that has been leaked, this trickle of leaks out about Vance, has been because of Kellyanne. When she was asked point blank about this, she's like, her answer was like a non-denial because she basically said, I haven't leaked anything, but everybody's calling me asking why he was picked. And she's like, I can't provide good answer. I'm not saying anything bad about him, but everybody is calling me, asking me about this. Like, why J.D. Vance? Why J.D. Vance? It's like,
okay, I'm going to defend J.D. Vance. If not J.D. Vance, who and for what reason?
Yeah.
This is to you. You're Trump's, you're leading the show. If not Trump, Vance, who?
Well,
who and why?
If you want to like attempt to make nice with the establishment of the party, you would pick a Rubio or something to give the veneer, that mattered or that you were extending an olive branch. But J.D. Vance isn't an olive branch to anybody.
No.
Who,
and there's no party to make up to anymore.
No, I mean, the party is completely changed. So that's part of it. So J.D. Vance is a doubling down on MAGA owns this party and MAGA is here to stay. That's what J.D. Vance is.
I go back to my original statement. The pick was Vivek.
Yeah.
Vivek would have been way better at this than J.D. Vance.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he speaks better. I mean, he communicates better. J.D. Vance has been just abysmal, I mean, in terms of handling his responses to all this. Do you notice how hyper-defensive he is, too? There was a reporter that asked him the other day, like, what makes you happy?
Yeah.
And he blasted him and said, like,
oh, not bullshit questions like this.
Like, what? Like, again, people want, like, this is a chance to humanize yourself. People want to know who you are.
Role play. I'm the reporter. You're J.D. Vance. J.D., can you tell us what makes you happy these days?
Well, what makes me happy? Okay, what I should give is the answer.
You're playing J.D. Vance. Just give me a quick 1-minute answer.
What makes me happy is, my family and being able to watch the, next generation of voters grow up and hopefully give them opportunities that I didn't have growing up in, the Rust Belt and that they're able to be part of an America that's flourishing and thriving. Something like that.
It's not.
It's easy.
Hard. It's not hard.
But like that's a softball and to completely disregard it. Like, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
So do you think when you join the Trump team, somebody specifically tells you will not apologize? You will not come off as soft. You will be a hard ass day one to the last day. You will not back down. Is this part of a strategy or do they just pick people that's their natural affect?
I mean, I think that I don't think they inherently told them that, but I think there is that culture, that vibe saying that you need to adopt the Trump mantra, because that is Trump's mantra. The problem is that it works for Trump with his base. It doesn't really work for anybody else. We've seen people try to emulate Trump and they fall flat. And Vance is an example of that, because it just he lost the authenticity argument from day one, because this was a guy who, as recently as a few years ago, said Trump could be America's next Hitler. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was down on Trump, made the pivot when he wanted a Senate seat. And that's the other thing that shows how undisciplined of a candidate he is, that leading up to his Senate race and during, he made a lot of these disparaging comments about cat ladies and about people without kids being sociopaths. So to me, the fact that he was willing to do that then, again, he was pandering to a very small audience, but like not thinking about his long-term ambition when we know he has it, like that's poor judgment. I mean, this isn't like from like a decade ago. This is from a couple years ago.
And as off-putting as J.D. Vance has been, Tim Walz has been just spot on. I mean, I don't know what Josh Shapiro would have brought to the ticket, but Walz's pitch, his tone, his excitement for an all-vibes election, he's got
super
it.
High energy, like you said. He comes across as like, you know, the dad, that type of candidate. I mean, he's approachable. It's just, that's what you want, I think, if you're looking for balance. And there's probably an argument to be made. I was a huge Josh Shapiro fan, so initially when this news hit, like I was very apprehensive. I was very worried because I was all about wanting to have Pennsylvania locked up in the bag and having the moderate Democratic governor. But Josh Shapiro was an AG like Kamala. They're very similar in profile in terms of that elite vibe they give off. And so Walz, in a way, counterbalances that, because he comes across as the everyman, you know, kind of guy and can speak that language. So I think that the way that this worked out is actually pretty good.
And I think you'd agree with me that the way you and I look at politics with a policy focus is completely out of fashion.
That's not how most people look at it. No, it's all about vibes.
It's an all vibes election. We can just say it. It doesn't matter. The fact that Kamala Harris has not had a sit down with the press doesn't mean one thing. No. It does not matter. There is no voter who is going to vote for Kamala Harris who's going to hold that against her at all. It doesn't matter if she ever sits down with the press. That's an obstacle that's been put up by the right-wing media as a way. It's a straw man for saying she's stupid, is really what it is.
Right.
And Trump will just at least come out and say it. Well, she's too stupid to talk to the media. That's why she can't do it. As the position she has, set it at the front of this wave, nobody gives one shit if she gives an hour-long presser or not. It's just not part of the equation.
No, not at all. And I mean,
should she get demerits for going this long without a sit down, or if she doesn't have a sit down to the end of the month, is that something that we should hold against her?
I mean, I think again, if we were judging by the environment 10, 20 years ago, absolutely. That's, you know, that should be taken into consideration. And especially I think if she doesn't give one like right after the convention, I would expect a major interview as soon as the convention concludes. Yeah. But so if that doesn't happen, then I would say, yeah, you know, that's a problem. But the fact is, it isn't a problem for most people.
No.
It wasn't a problem for Trump. He hasn't done a major mainstream media interview in a long time. He speaks, you know, in the Fox News silo and in his favored, you know, formats. But in terms of like major media, he doesn't do those.
And I want to talk about how they do polling for a minute. It's not that I'm an expert at polling, but I think I talk to a lot of people about politics during the week. And I think there's a perception, like when there's a poll done in Pennsylvania, okay, so they called 1,000 people, right? And they kept calling until they got to 1,000 people that said they were going to vote. And, you know, 47% said they were going to vote for, you know, Biden, you know, 48% said they were going to vote for Trump, or whatever those percentages are. And then as they do the poll again and that changes, I think people think they go back to that 1,000 people.
No.
And if there's a 5% swing in the poll, I think they think it means, well, these people said they weren't going to vote for Trump now, and they're going to vote for Harris. That is not how polling works.
No.
The 4 to 5% rise that you see for Harris in some of the swing states is because the model has completely changed, because the turnout model has completely changed. A 5% rise in Harris's poll number does not mean 5% of Trump voters now have decided they're swing voters and they're going to vote for Harris. No. What it means is the turnout model favors Harris +5.
That's exactly what it means. And where polling has been off or wrong in the past, like 2016 and, even in 2022, has been with the turnout
Step question, Michael, there, Brandon.
Is within the turnout, trying to get turnout right on both sides. That is the largest challenge that pollsters have, like trying to figure out who is likely to turn out and which side is going to have an edge. And so when you see the differences, it's because the turnout modeling is being tweaked. It's really always being tweaked. But especially if there's a cataclysmic event or a catalyst like what we saw with the nominee being changed, you better absolutely believe that the turnout is going to be shifting.
So when they call back in to redo the poll, like I said, they're not looking for people that have changed.
No,
and of the 1,000 people that they call, 30 or 40% of them aren't voting.
Right.
They're a double hater, or I hate Trump, or whatever it is, and that goes into the forecast of the model. The energy and excitement that people on the ground in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan are reporting, that shows the rise in her polling. The more people are more likely to vote for Harris now than we're ever going to vote for Biden.
That's right.
So we can see Harris has more upside. There's more votes for her to get. Again, she is not taking votes from Trump.
Right.
She is energizing Democrats or people who would lean Democrat, low propensity voters to come out to vote. And that's the way modern elections are done.
That's right.
I've been bitching about there are no swing voters for probably a year. So I finally found a little bit of evidence on this. So I found an article by Data for Progress. And with Biden in the race, they said swing votes were at 14%. Okay? But then they stuck a big asterisk on that and said, oh, by the way, to get that, we also included this year for the first time
leaners,
first-time voters.
Oh, okay.
I have a feeling they did that because the number was so small, they didn't have an analysis without it. Then I heard Karl Rove talking to Brian Kilmeade, and he said the best that he can come up with for true swing voters, as in you have voted for one side in the past, and now you are voting for the other side now, he thinks it's about 5% or less. So again, who these people are chasing I'm not trying to talk somebody out of voting for Trump to vote for Harris. I'm trying to energize my folks. And in both candidates, Harris is running an all base race too. And the picks of Walz just shows that.
It solidifies that. I mean, she was clearly trying to gin up the base, get them behind her, and reverse the bleeding that happened under Biden.
I mean, if Harris and Walz pulls this off, there's no doubt that our politics lean progressive. Well, let me back up. If Harris and Walz wins this election, can we take anything from it about where America's actual policy preferences are? Or is the only thing we can take from it is Trump sucks?
Oh, well, yeah, I think that becomes difficult because I think, again, in primary polling matchups, people like Nikki Haley did very well in the general election polling. So I think it becomes very difficult to try to extrapolate what is due to just policy preference versus anti-Trump because so much of this is anti-Trump. There's a baked-in anti-Trump among independents, among Dem leaners. Like Trump drives turnout. Like the turnout that we saw in 2020, a lot of that was anti-Trump driven. So I think part of it you could say is policy preference. You can't deny that out of the last 7 presidential election cycles, Republicans have only won the popular vote once.
Yeah.
So that points to policy preference. That was in 2004. So that has something to do with it. But also, I think like Trump being a drag on the party is why you saw the 2022 midterms occur the way they did, the 2018 midterms, why Georgia has 2 Democratic senators, why Arizona has 2 Democratic senators, Democratic governor. I don't think those states have been shifting politically anyway, but you wouldn't have seen the rapid shift that you've seen if it wasn't for Trump. He accelerated that shift.
What would this race look like, Brandon, if Nikki Haley was the Republican nominee? And she had kind of a MAGA-friendly-ish VP. I don't know who that would be, but if Nikki Haley was at the top of the ticket, what would this look like?
That's interesting because I think, number one, it would give the permission structure for all Republican voters and former Republican voters to come back home. So, people that have left the party have been disengaged and disgusted with that. It would have also been a more compelling message for the center because Nikki Haley is smarter than Trump. So she would have had a general election platform that would speak to the center. A good example of that was she was the only candidate in the primaries who had articulated a very good middle position on abortion when none of the others would. That didn't help her on the primary stage with that crew, but it would have definitely helped her in a general. So I think it would be a much more competitive election. It would be at least dead even. And I think that it would make it very difficult for Harris to get states like Georgia and Arizona. I think it would take those off the table.
Since I've been on a roll of being absolutely wrong, I can continue that streak in saying I think Haley would be getting demolished.
Okay.
Because what party does Haley represent? The only cohort that Trump is chasing is young men. That's where the energy of the Republican Party is. Nikki Haley would not resonate with them at all. Your Charlie Kirk, Tim Pool, Jack Posobiec, they're all out. So the one thing that you've got now would completely fall away from you. And I'm not convinced there's any Republican
and you could
Party
make an
left
argument
for Nikki
that
to go
the
to.
low information MAGA voters that propelled Trump to wins in 2016 and even propelled his vote in 2020 would have fallen off with Nikki Haley.
Yep. None of that showing up.
I do think I want to just go back to the young men argument, Trump's play there, because I forgot to mention this earlier. But there's reward there, but there's a lot of risk there because these are not frequent voters. And so it's one thing to appear on a podcast and say, oh, hey, he's cool, blah, blah. But like, will they actually come out to the polls at the end of the day? And some of these are right on the edge. If you look at the audiences, some are 17, some are 16. They're not all 18 either. So yes, many of them are of legal voting age, not all of them though. So again, risk and reward, and he's dealing with a cohort that doesn't show up to vote regularly. That's part of the problem.
And it feels like Trump's campaign is going to pivot to being mostly online at this point.
That's what it seems like.
He's got this Monday thing with Elon and X. That's going to be a shit show. I mean, have you ever heard Elon on one of these? He's as free-flowing and shitting as Trump. I'm assuming they're going to have at least one other person or two other people there to try to moderate or keep things flowing, but I don't.
Is there a set time limit for this, like an hour?
I don't know.
Please tell me there is, because otherwise this could be like hours long.
Why? I mean, just let him get on the. I don't think there is, but I mean, Trump is going after that young, always online male vote, and I think what he's saying is that's my focus. Anybody else I can take with me, that's who's going to take me to victory. And if Harris is able to keep her shit together, keep her momentum going, avoid a massive mistake, her coalition just simply is way bigger than that.
Oh, yeah, and the polling has already shown. So New York Times, CNN poll has new polls out this week from the Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, showing her with 4-point lead at 50%, which is a magic number. But the crosstabs of that polling shows that she is overperforming Biden with young voters, with black voters, and to a lesser degree with Hispanic voters. And then the big takeaway there is even slightly overperforming Biden among white blue-collar voters, which is interesting, which I did not see coming. So if she can continue that momentum and overperform Biden and that entire coalition, then she has the election.
I saw a poll that she is now, by 1 point, more trusted than Trump on the economy.
Yeah.
If that is anywhere even directionally true, Trump is done.
And she's also seen as more intelligent by more than 9 points than Trump, smarter. I forgot to mention, of all the swing states that were most danger of slipping away, which she has come back as well to at least even, is Nevada, because Nevada was really slipping away and looked like it was almost practically gone at one point, and it may not be gone now.
What do you think of her? I'll also do the no tax on tips thing last night in Nevada. She had a rally and she busted that one out.
I saw that, yeah.
Just some trolling.
Exactly.
There's no possible way that happens, right?
No, and there's no way. I mean, it's a complete ploy. Yeah. And the problem is, at the end of the day, if you look at the actual policy behind it, it wasn't enough to move the union from supporting Trump, because it's just not.
And I'm not giving Harris demerit points for that. That's more of a troll than anything. Brandon, can you envision how that law is going to be written? Because I imagine if they actually tried to pass that through, don't you think there'd be some caveat that some sort of, hedge fund now can list their fee as a tip and be tax-free? Doesn't this
absolutely.
open up all kinds of shenanigans?
I mean, talk about it would be a huge loophole. You would see all kinds of companies, start saying it would be a disaster. It would be Kansas, like our state tax cut that we had under Brownback, that was a huge loophole. Well, where LLCs that didn't actually have employees would, just basically take that tax cut when they weren't entitled to. I mean,
so the hostess that walks me to the table, her wage is fully taxed, but the server is not. This doesn't make any sense at all. Again, I don't mind Harris because it's just a troll. Right. It's not going to happen, but I think it's designed just to kick Trump one time and just see if you can get a reaction out of it.
I mean, hey, if you can get in his head, there's a lot of fun to be had in that.
Do you I've been thinking a lot about what happens if Trump loses. Because my 20-year prediction of the demise of the Republican Party comes true. It's not the Republican Party will die off and go away, but they'll spend a cycle or two in the wilderness, and they'll be forced to reinvent themselves in some way. One of the things that's going to be really interesting if Trump loses, what do you think an audit of the Trump campaign finances is going to bear? Because I've been hearing, too, Trump's ground game is not there. It's not existent. No. Once again, they did not build out the Democratic-style boots-on-the-ground ballot-chasing operation that they need.
Right.
At some point...
They're farming that out to all these third-party groups that they have no control over.
Charlie Kirk's, TPUSA. At some point, does anybody ask any questions about that? I think there has to be a Trump loss for that to happen.
A Trump loss, and I think especially if Dems gain the House, then the party will have to finally go into this long overdue retrospective into what went wrong. And I think part of coming out of that, where there will be a lot of scrutiny on the campaign finances, on the campaign strategy, on who benefited financially, in terms of grift that occurred. Because I think it's inevitable we're going to see this. All these organizations are going to pocket money for get out the vote efforts and more. They're going to do very little. A lot of that money is going to go for overhead and salaries and not to on-the-ground operations because, again, we've seen this playbook on the MAGA right before. It happens over and over again.
Yeah.
And, I think there will be a lot of scrutiny. And so a loss will force that. Anything outside of a loss, it just continues and there's no oversight.
If he wins, nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
We're back in power, yada, yada, yada. That's something for a much later time to get worried about.
Yeah.
If Trump loses, there's no way the Republican Party follows him down this election was stolen path again.
No, I think that has to be over at this point. I think
so.
Yeah, there's not going to be will for that. And I think it's also very different scenario now that you have because Republicans don't have the Senate like they did at that period. Democrats do. The House majority, Republican House majority, is 2 at this point margin. Mm-hmm. And so, again, there won't be any appetite for that. I think he'll get a very different response. There's also been the Electoral College Reform Act, which basically shuts down opportunities for certification to not be followed. Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court struck down the sovereign legislature theory, which was also something that they attempted to leverage in 2020 to go directly to lawmakers in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Arizona and get them to overrule the popular vote. So there's all these structural reforms plus the lack of appetite for it. I think people will finally just be done with it.
I agree. He can't rally the troops again for another charge on election theft. I wouldn't think. I mean, most Republicans have to know that's a road that just leads absolutely nowhere.
I know that he'll attempt to do so because that's the only thing he has in his arsenal. I mean, that's he does it time and time again. So, but nobody's going to take him up on that. It's not going to be like it was in 2020.
No.
Plus, it's very different. Again, this is why Biden's election mattered in 2020. That he won't have the mechanics of government to leverage and to be able to tell people, you do this, seize voting machines,
And his threats are all hollow now.
Yeah.
You really can't do anything to me.
No, he doesn't have the power to do so.
Brandon, I'm about 90% sure this is accurate. A quick Google search probably would find me to be wrong. But I believe every Democratic president that has taken office since World War II has also had a majority in the Senate and the House when they took office in their first term. I think that's true.
I think that might be true, yeah.
When Democrats win, we typically bring the legislation along with us.
Right.
Now, a lot of that has been that from World War II up to Newt Gingrich, the legislation was dominated by Democrats, specifically the House. We held the House for 54 years or something?
Yeah, a long time, until 1994, yeah.
But the point is that when Democrats win the presidency, they typically win the other two branches too. And I would expect that with Kamala Harris. If she wins, I think we hold the Senate and we flip the House as well.
And the numbers look really good in the Senate. I was always bullish about flipping the House. I think that was kind of a given based on the numbers and where things lie with redistricting. The Senate I was more shaky on, but the Senate looks great so far. The incumbents are doing very well, and the most vulnerable states. So, yeah, I think that there's an opportunity to have a trifecta with all three there.
It can't go this good until November 5th. It has to be a down cycle. Tell me what some of the down cycles are. Tell me how we can still blow this. You've watched Democrats step on it your entire life. And Democrats always have less power than what we should due to how we operate. How is this going to blow up in our face? How can Trump regain the momentum and beat Kamala Harris?
Well, I mean, there's a number of ways that could happen. You could have an outside event. I think what's happening in the Middle East right now is still very perilous, and with especially Israel potentially launching a war in Lebanon against Hezbollah. Even, smaller events like the bombing of the hospital that happened this week, that's a powder keg right there. Obviously, the foreign actors, the Russians and the North Koreans and the Chinese and what they attempt to introduce or do, what happens in Ukraine can have an impact. I think also ensuring that Kamala Harris has discipline in her message, doesn't flub up at the first interview she gives to a major media reporter, that's going to be crucial. And I think ensuring that the campaign does not, because I'm all about the vibes right now, but we're still a very closely divided 50-50 country. So being smart enough to not get too in the weeds on policy, where you put yourself out on a limb on something that's very far left, where you might, give Trump an opportunity to leverage you and paint you as far leftists who want to take the country down. Yeah. And again, none of that has happened yet, but the potential is always there for something to happen. You walk yourself into a policy position or a quip that turns out to irreparably harm you.
So it sounds like you're saying that she's going to have to make some mistakes for Trump to get back on track.
I think so. That's the state of the race right now. She would have to make mistakes.
We've completely flipped it. 3 weeks ago, we said it was Trump's to lose.
Oh, absolutely.
And he would have to make some sort of colossal mistake to get Biden back in the game. In 3 weeks.
Isn't it crazy how we've just...
flipped? Again, it's how hated that man is.
Yeah.
Nobody, the guy, the mayor from Mesa, who's asking for this? Who wants this?
Right.
Who thinks this is a good idea, him coming back to the presidency? I think once that permission structure switched with Biden being gone and Harris didn't make a complete fool out of herself in the first 48 to 72 hours, people are like, yep, I've seen my path and that's what I'm going to do.
I think that's exactly right.
Okay, Brandon, now you have to summon all of your political campaign class skills. Now you're Trump's campaign managers.
Oh, okay.
What does that look like? What is your next 30-day plan if you're Trump's campaign manager?
Well, I think, next 30 days he needs to start holding rallies again. He needs to get out there, show that he's capable, that he has energy, that he can undertake this race. I think also he needs to do something to change the dynamic, and I don't know what it is, but he needs to outline a policy position or something that's not going to come across as pandering or just completely unworkable. Mm-hmm. But he needs to be able to showcase that he's intelligent. He's losing the
that's a good one.
Polling on being intelligent and thoughtful, because right now he's been a one-track horse on just anti-immigration, And rooting for the economy to fail as well, which I think is a mistake.
He does that all the time.
And so, like, he needs something that is policy prescriptive, that is hopeful, and something that he can rally people around and say, I'm serious about this presidency. Here's how a Trump presidency in 2024 would be different than the last one. Here's what I'm proposing. Because we don't have any indication of that. We've seen you govern for 4 years. We saw what happened with that. Like, how would this time be different? What are you trying to do that would be, that would set yourself apart? He hasn't outlined that.
That sounded like a logical, reasonable thing to do. I asked you that question as a setup. That I sent this to the political group chat, and nobody really responded to it. But I think this is really telling. Charlie Kirk runs Turning Point USA.
Right.
This is the organization that the Republicans have farmed out the ballot chasing apparatus to. This is a person that absolutely holds sway with Donald Trump. He has direct access to the former president. He talks to him. This is a man in Trump's ear. Okay. So you heard Brandon's professional, logical, traditional, this is what they need to do. These are Charlie Kirk's 10 suggestions to Trump. He did this in public to help change the campaign around. Are you ready for this one?
I'm ready.
Here we go. Number 1, grandkids and ads. Okay?
Okay.
Number 2, get a dog. Number 3, now we get to the meat of them. Hang out at a grocery store and pay for people's groceries. Number 4, visit the border every 2 weeks, including visiting the rape tree at the border. Allegedly, this is a tree that men hang trophies on after they rape migrants across. Really drive the point home, Trump, and go down and give a press conference in front of that. Another one, go to the homes of 2-year-olds and talk to them and their parents about how Democrats support infanticide, specifically how Walz supports infanticide. This is the story that 5 children in Minnesota over the last year have been killed outside of the womb. You don't hang out in the kooky spots on the net like I
story.
do.
Okay.
So that one probably missed you. This is another good one. Trump goes to a preschool and reads to kids. Reads the Constitution and other patriotic documents. Yes, to children.
Okay.
Trump has a round table with a dozen suburban women. That could be okay.
Yeah,
that would be
that's
a
an okay
fucking
one.
disaster.
But that would not go well. Yeah.
I'm just picturing 12 women like my wife just ripping Trump a new one.
And I can just picture Trump being like, when one of them's talking, excuse me, I'm talking.
Yeah.
Let me.
Yes.
He'll just
counter-program the DNC with a rally every day. Not bad. That could be doable.
It's normal.
This is a good one. Go to church every Sunday. A Victims of Illegals event. Some sort of rally with people impacted by immigrant crime. That would go over well. And finally, visit the Little League World Series and throw out the first pitch. I bring this up that a man who his grift is directly related to Trump.
Yeah.
And he has direct access to him in public, is airing out amateurish bullshit like that as this is what we can do to get the campaign back on track. If this is where you're at, you are fucked.
Yeah, you're failing. I mean, that's all desperation. That's what that tells me.
Could you see Trump doing any of those? Standing at an Aldi paying for people's that's ridiculous. I sent that out to the group as a message of this is more proof. They have no clue what the message
There's no plan,
be.
yeah.
And even if they came up with one, it has to be in the context of what Trump can execute, which is getting very, very tight.
Well, and we're in the final, we're in 90 days, right? So, I
think we're 87.
86
now. I mean, it's getting...
And again, first ballots go out in North Carolina in 30 days.
Yeah.
So that's a timeline we're dealing with, folks.
If she can replicate her first 30 days for the next 30 days, she's got it.
Yeah, I agree.
And when does the election start to get baked in? I mean, to me, somewhere around mid to late September.
Yeah, definitely by early October, it's pretty much baked in, yeah.
Let's change topics for the ending here. What's happening in Russia and Ukraine is fascinating. And the Ukrainians got 6,000 to 10,000 troops together and basically invaded Russia.
Yes.
And they've taken over, 30 kilometers or some, the Kursk region of Russia apparently is completely under Ukrainian control.
And this is the first incursion onto Russian territory by the Ukrainians since this war began, because this entire war, the Ukrainians have been trying to regain territory lost to the Russians. And that Kursk region is extremely significant because it was the site of a major victory by the Soviets in beating back the Nazis during the Second World War. It has also been a strategic outpost for the Russians in the last couple of decades. So, yeah, it's a big moral victory for the Ukrainians. It doesn't mean that they'll be able to gain more Russian territory.
No.
But it shows that the tide at least is changing. They finally have the weapons they need, the artillery. They had to wait 6 months because of the intransigence of Mike Johnson and then the House Speaker. But yes, I mean, that is super significant, especially for it to be coming at this stage.
But this is my plea to France and Germany. Put them down. Give them what they need.
Give them everything they need.
Send troops at least to guard Ukrainian positions inside Ukraine. Let them go. This is the opportunity for almost a complete collapse of the Russian military. You're watching 50 and 75 dudes surrender to 2 guys in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I think they're down to a lot of their conscripts now. These people have no interest in fighting.
No.
And if you give Russia just a little more push, the whole thing might collapse at this point.
I agree. I mean, their military enlisted has never been strong. No. And so they've had to over-rely on the conscripts and these third parties, the Wagner group, the Wagner group.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that happen in real time. And you're right. I think with the right resources, I mean, if the NATO countries all pitched in, I mean, we could make a big splash.
Couple. I mean, they got like a 15 or a dozen to 15 F-16s that they're starting to use. Now's the time. If you wanted to really collapse Russia and kick them out of Ukraine, kick in some men, some more equipment, and let's see if we can get it done.
Yeah, I agree.
That'd be a great way to kick off election season, with a complete collapse of the Russian army and a victory in Ukraine.
Oh, yeah, that would be, talk about like the pride and the morale boost that would give for, over the last couple of years.
Because if Trump wins, Ukraine's done.
Oh, yeah.
They're done. You might as well just lay down.
I mean, he's going to hand
number of
Ukraine
people
over to Putin. That's obvious.
Because there's just no way around it. Brandon, is there anything you want to end on? Is there anything you're thinking about other than politics these days?
A couple things.
I'll have to admit, I'm totally underwater with politics at this point.
I am too. Well, one thing, the spectacular collapse of RFK Jr. has been fun to watch. And I predicted this. I told you, Craig, that he was not going to have double-digit support forever, that he was going to fall to reality. He's in single digits now. The crazy story that his campaign released about the bear cub.
Just ridiculous.
Like, what is going on? Like, that's a whole another freak show to watch. So that's been interesting.
And Joe Rogan come out and quasi-supporting RFK Jr. is not nothing.
No.
I mean, Biden lost Texas by 5.5 points.
Texas has been trending like Georgia, and they've just been behind a couple of years. So I could easily see Texas get to the point where it's 50-50 staying, or it goes the way of Georgia did in 2020.
Yeah. I never had much faith in RFK. He's just an absolute kook.
He's crazy.
And any Google search on him just eliminates him as a candidate.
I did want to mention, I'm launching a separate, very brief podcast on international affairs.
Sweet.
World Unraveled.
There we go.
So if people want to check it out, worldunraveled.podbean.com. But I'll periodically do like a 15 to 20 minute blurb on an international event and get my take on it. Just go
absolutely.
in details.
There's so many things happening in the world right
and
now.
this is the year of elections. Like around the world, there are so many elections this year.
I mean, and it feels like Iran had at least hit the pause button on allowing Hezbollah to attack
because that could have spiraled
Israel.
out of control.
And it
very quickly.
Feels like everybody's saying, okay, we don't want that, but we have to find a way to at least give. I don't know. What would make Iran say, there's nothing to say we won't retaliate. We won't retaliate now might be the best that you can do. But,
yeah, I
mean, we went onto their territory, Israel did, and while they completely had the right to do that, Iran's not going to let that. They're not going to let that go.
No, they're going to strike back at some point. And the question is when and where. And so in Iran, I mean, has the ability to wait patiently and act. And so it's, who knows? I mean, it could be this year, it could be next year, but it'll happen.
But something's going to happen.
Yeah.
I just hope nothing major happens before the election.
Me too. I mean, that's the one external element that's most scary to me.
But with that said, do you think Trump is capable of communicating with the American people about a
Oh,
no,
not at all.
There's
not
just
no
way. That might work completely in Harris's favor, too.
I agree.
Who knows? All right, that's our hour. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.